Hi guys, today we're going to read 7 and 8, chapters 7 and 8 in Who Was Roald Dahl. So, chapter 7, Family Man. Back in New York City again, Roald met a young American actress, Patricia Neal. She had been in plays on Broadway and many movies. Ronald Reagan, the future president, starred with her in one. She was seated next to Roald at dinner, but she didn't like him at all. He ignored her and talked to Leonard Bernstein, a famous music composer and conductor. How rude! But over time, Roald managed to charm Pat, and they fell in love. When Roald was 37 and Patricia was 27, they had a small wedding in New York City and moved into an apartment near Central Park. Roald and Pat were able to buy a house in England near Roald's mother. The couple lived part-time in England and part-time in America. In 1955, to their great delight, their daughter Olivia was born. Roald became a stay-at-home dad. He took care of the baby when Pat had acting jobs. They had another daughter, Tessa, in 1957 and a son, Theo, in 1960. Times were good. The couple hired a nanny so Roald had more time to write. He thought he might write for children. He made up lots of stories that he told his children at bedtime. He said, "Had I not had children, I would not have written the books for children." Roald wanted to write books that were so funny, imaginative, and exciting they would make more children want to read. He wanted to write something new that kids hadn't seen before. How about a story with an earthworm, a spider, and a centipede as its main characters? James and the Giant Peach was in the works. Everything was going so well. Then their 3-month-old son, Theo, had a terrible accident. Theo's baby carriage, stroller, with Theo in it, was struck by a taxi cab. Theo hit his head and was rushed to the hospital. Baby Theo was temporarily blinded and ran terrible high fevers. That means he was blind for a short amount of time. In time, Theo got better. However, he was operated on 9 times before he was 3 years old. It was terrifying for the Dahl family. The accident made Roald and Pat hate New York City. The Dahls moved back to England. For a long time, Theo had a drain in his head. It stopped fluid from building up in his brain. The trouble was that the drain kept clogging. Roald was determined to solve the clogging problem. He worked with a doctor and an engineer and invented a much better drain. It helped thousands of children. Wow, I didn't know he was an inventor too. Here's a snapshot of Roald and wildlife. Roald enjoyed life in the country. He grew roses and vegetables, especially huge onions, his favorite. The family had chickens and a black rabbit and tortoises and birds. They had a lot of birds, over 100. They didn't have any cats, however. Roald didn't like them, but Roald loved dogs. Besides his racing dogs, he had many as pets. He had a black lab mutt named Jelly. He claimed Jelly wrote his stories for him. Roald's best-known dog was Chopper, a brown and white Jack Russell Terrier. Roald spoiled him terribly. He fed him oysters, candy, and caviar, Roald's favorite food. Chopper seemed to understand everything that Roald said. He lived to be 16 years old. Just before Roald died, he was working on a book inspired by Chopper. So Roald started working on a new book. It was dedicated to Theo. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was about a boy who is one of 5 kids to win a tour of an amazing chocolate factory. Roald still loved chocolate. Once again, when his life was going so well, tragedy struck the Dahls. Their oldest daughter, Olivia, died of a rare kind of measles. She was only 7. The family was crushed, especially Roald. His own father had died of grief after losing a daughter at the exact same age. Roald stopped talking and shut himself off from everyone. He couldn't write. Pat, grieving herself, did all she could to hold things together through this awful time. Little by little, life got better. Roald got back to work on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He rewrote it 4 times. In the first version of the book, Roald described the Oompa Loompas who worked in the chocolate factory as being African pygmies. This was changed in later editions of the book. Some people accused Roald of being racist. He really wasn't. Actually, the character of Charlie was originally meant to be black and was based on his old friend Madisho in Africa. In 1964, baby Ophelia was born, and Patricia won an Academy Award for Best Actress for a movie called HUD. It also starred Paul Newman. In that same year, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was published. It was instantly successful. The year 1964 was a happy one for the dolls. That's so sad. Chapter 8, More Ups and Downs. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was a tremendous success. They printed 2 million copies in China, the most of any book up to that time. Later, around 1970, Roald wrote a screenplay for the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. By 1965, Pat was a big star. Roald's book was doing so well, he was as famous as his wife. The dolls moved to a fancy Hollywood mansion with a swimming pool. That's probably a sketch of that house. That looks very nice. A snapshot of Charlie, the movie. The director for the movie thought Roald's screenplay wouldn't work. Roald revised it. That means he edited it. We're doing that with our state reports. Or we did that with our state reports. Meanwhile, another writer was hired to redo the script behind his back. Even the title was changed. Roald realized the movie was out of his hands. He didn't like the way Gene Wilder portrayed Willie either. Roald had wanted Peter Sellers to star. The movie was a success anyway, and book sales took off. But Roald never wrote another screenplay for his own books again. What would Roald have thought of the movie remake in 2005 starring Johnny Depp? You know how Johnny Depp redid Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I wonder if he would have liked the way that one was portrayed. Unbelievably, tragedy struck again. Pat had a sudden stroke. For 3 weeks, she was in a coma. In a coma is when you sleep and you don't wake up. It looked like she might die. Roald was at her bedside for days. When she woke up, she couldn't move or talk. After a month in the hospital, Pat went home, but she was depressed. It's really sad. She sat and did nothing. She could barely talk and jumbled her words. She couldn't read or write. Roald took charge. He organized neighbors and friends to help get her moving. He hired a speech therapist to work with Pat 6 hours a day, every day. Roald said Pat would be back to acting in a year. The doctors thought he was crazy. Roald forced Pat to get well. It was as if she was in the army at boot camp. He made her exercise all day. He refused to let her feel sorry for herself. Some people thought he was cruel. Pat called him Roald the Rotten. But Pat slowly got better, and she was grateful to Roald. Doctors saw that Roald's tough program worked. They began using the same methods to treat other stroke victims. The dolls also had a new baby. Lucy was born 5 months after Pat's stroke. By the 1970s, Pat was acting again. The dolls had survived another challenge. With their new Hollywood lifestyle, the dolls needed money. Roald didn't like writing screenplays for movies, but it paid well. He wrote a screenplay for You Only Live Twice based on a James Bond book. The movie was a moneymaker. In 1987, while Roald was in the hospital again for his back, his beloved mother, Sophie, died at age 82. She died on the 5th anniversary of Olivia's death. That means she died on the same day of the year as his daughter 5 years later. They really have some ups and downs, this family. Tomorrow we'll read chapter 9 and 10, and I believe that's the end of the book. All right.